Okay, morning everyone. So I'll be talking about fungicide resistance in Monilinia and Botrytis populations, and this is specifically against pyrimethanil and fludioxonil in our stone fruit orchards. Before I start, I'd just like to mention that when we deal with fungicides, firstly, we obviously use this for crop protection. So it's used to protect our crop. This is quite obvious. But secondly, we need to consider its fungicide resistance management, and that is to protect our product. So when we're dealing with fungicides, please don't ever forget the second. Okay, so why the research? So a few years ago, we started seeing the introduction and use of fludioxonil in stone fruit orchards, and because this is the most effective post-harvest fungicide, there was a bit of a fear of maybe losing this fungicide in the future due to resistance. So that gave us ground to start this research. We also included pyrimethanil as a fungicide that's been around for a few years, just to compare it with. Looking at raspberries as a model, we've seen from studies in northern Germany development of fungicide resistance within 5 years. Obviously, this is quite a different crop, but something to take note of. Closer to home, there has been studies that showed fungicide-resistant isolates from nursery stock. So I think the aim is quite obvious, and that's why we started this research, looking at the materials and methods. So basically, identifying the orchards where we'll get our isolates from. Obviously, these orchards must have different spray programs, backgrounds, and then that stems helped us go a lot. Freshness First helped us a lot to get our isolates. So we isolated our Monilinia and Botrytis isolates. And from there, we did our in vitro tests, looking at different concentrations. Specifically, in this case, I want to make note of a method used to look at fungicide resistance using the discriminatory dose. So it takes quite some time to describe this, but in essence, this is a concentration that would give us an indication of an isolate being resistant or not. And these concentrations also derive from a lot of literature. After that, some of these isolates were tested on fruit, and then inserted into storage. Okay, so sorry, this is a bit small. I heard from the back, these tables tend to be a bit of a problem. But in essence, we did this. This is just the results for fludioxonil, for instance. And with quite confidence, we can say at this point in time, we haven't seen any form of resistance. So a sigh of relief in that sense. We included the recommended dose. I didn't mention this as the dose used that's stated on the product label, just to see if we're still seeing good product efficacy. Looking at pyrimethanil, I didn't include this because it's recommended to rather use a minimal medium. In this case, we used PDA, so potato dextrose agar. Some literature use this, but FRAC recommend not to use this, and this is why the data was not included. However, in that state, the recommended dose of pyrimethanil still did very well. So also just bear in mind, the discriminatory dose is much, much lower than your recommended dose stated on your product label. So this is on the fruit. And this is the results for Monilinia. So seeing obviously some resistance in your pyrimethanil. This is not a surprise to us. And then fludioxonil, so that 50% threshold for discriminatory dose, if it exceeds that threshold, some would class that definitely as showing a sign of resistance. And a lot of the isolates still falling within the right spec. Okay, recommended dose still performed very well for both fungicides. And this is the findings for Botrytis. We saw some of the fludioxonil discriminatory doses exceeding that 50%. The exact reason is not totally clear. It might be inoculation effect, but based on FRAC recommendations, we still know the plating method was the recommended method, and there we saw nothing of concern. Okay, recommended dose doing very well still. Okay, so just basically in conclusion, we can say that fludioxonil is still very safe. Pyrimethanil showing obviously signs of fungicide resistance, but still a fungicide with a lot of usability. It's still showing very good results using the recommended dose. And then we need to ask going forward, we need to start looking at this in long term, because fungicide resistance is never based on a single year or 2 or 3 years. Actually need to look at this in a 5-year spectrum. like economics, it goes up and down, and these populations, we need to start looking at that. So yes, thanks. Oh, and this is a recommendation. I'm not going to go through this in length. I think the slides will be available afterwards. This is just a summary. So please look at your FRAC guidelines. This is what I pulled out just for proper fungicide-resistant management. Again, I think nursery is coming up a bit. Nurseries should always apply these protocols in equal stringency to ensure good propagation material. And never use one fungicide in your program. That just leaves it vulnerable. Okay, so thanks.